What's up and welcome back to the Kind of Funny Screencast. Of course, I'm Tim Geddes and I'm joined by It's Christmas in May, Joey Noel.
Hello, happy Tuesday?
Happy Elise's birthday to you.
Exactly.
And also joining us is the big dog, Kevin Coelho.
Hey.
Yeah, everyone, it's Elise's birthday today. You should go wish her a happy birthday over on Twitter. And rounding out the group right now, it is my Canadian hockey puck, the one and only Matt Rorabeck.
I'm wearing a Toronto Maple Leafs hat. They won 5-0 last night. They're up
Hell
1-0 against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I missed it for the MCU, so you know how committed I am for this.
I appreciate the dedication because I know you well enough to know that the two highest things in your life are the MCU and your beloved Maple Leafs. So
That is true.
that must have been hard for you to have to make the decision there.
I struggled for like a week leading up to it. I'm like, I could just see it on Thursday night with everyone. I probably don't need to see it early. I could watch the Leafs. And the Leafs have lost, they haven't won a Stanley Cup since 1967, which is a long time. So the playoffs are important, but it was game one. And I was like, all right, I'll just watch the third period when I get out of the game. And I did that on my way home on my phone and it was great. And they won. So, but now Doctor Strange time, I'm pumped.
I am pumped as well. Now, Matt, you already did a spoiler-free review over on your channel, which is
Untitled Movie Podcast and Untitled Movie Reviews. You can get it on YouTube and podcast services everywhere.
So yeah, after this, if you want even more, you can go check that out. But of course, this is the Kind of Funny Screencast where every week we get together to talk about the latest in TV, movies, and trailers. This is our spoiler-free review of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness that we're doing here. Then later in the week on Friday, we're going to be doing our MCU in review with the entire crew, where we're going to rank, recap, and review it against all of the other entries in the Marvel Studios pantheon of projects, both TV and movies that they've been coming out with. And speaking of that, we have a lot more screencasts this week. We have tomorrow, Moon Knight finale. We're going to be giving our thoughts on that as well. So stay tuned right here to youtube.com/kindafunny, roosterteeth.com, or your favorite podcast service. Just search for Kind of Funny Screencast. We'll be right there for you. If you wanted to get the show ad-free and watch live as we record it, you got to go to patreon.com/kindafunny, just like our Patreon producers, Anonymous, Molecule, and Fargo Brady have done. Very exciting stuff. Today, we're brought to you by ExpressVPN, Chime, and Babbel, but we'll get to all of that later. Let's get right into it. And so let's just at the top say this. What we mean by spoiler-free is we're going to be as vague as possible to not spoil anything, but we will be talking about things that were shown in the trailers. That is the line that we're holding for everybody, because obviously we do not want to ruin this experience for anybody out there. Joey Noel, I want to start with you. What did you think about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness?
This was not 100% what I expected when I walked into this. I think I am a Sam Raimi fan. I like his movies kind of other than the Spider-Man movies, for what that's worth. So I was really interested to see what his take on a horror movie was, but then also knowing that it's like within the Marvel MCU and knowing that it was probably going to be restrained a little bit. I was surprised that it felt very Sam Raimi and like fully committed to that. And I didn't necessarily think that the MCU and Kevin Feige would let him go as far as he did in terms of like injecting his flavor of things into it. I think so. That's kind of like a table setter in the sense that like if you like Sam Raimi stuff, I think you're going to dig it. If you're not a huge Sam Raimi fan, I think you might be a little bit more mixed on how you feel about this movie. I think Danny Elfman's music is undeniably woven through this in a way that like I know that Tim is usually the one that picks up on the musical cues of this movie. And that's something that like I kind of miss in a lot of things. And this is a key point of this movie, and I really enjoyed it. I love Danny Elfman's music. I think the story is really interesting. It's kind of a weird, slower start, but it definitely ramps up in the middle and the third act. I think that it's really strong performances from everybody that's in it. I was really surprised at how much I liked America Chavez. I think usually with newer characters getting introduced to these movies, it's the same thing that how I felt about Awkwafina in Shang-Chi, where it's like, oh, is this going to be too much? Is it gonna be good, but I felt like it was a really good balance for a new character. I had a lot of fun. I have a lot of criticisms about it. But overall, I was really pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed it and how much they let Sam Raimi do his thing.
Kevin Coelho.
Yeah, I was kind of blown away by how much this movie does and how hard it goes. Because I feel like there were a lot of places where they just full on did some stuff and it was like, wow. And I'm sorry I have to be so vague, but it's like it left me blown away. I enjoyed this movie. I don't know, as you know, where it's gonna rank and all that. That's a much longer and deeper conversation I need to have with myself. But like I was like, the stuff that goes on in this left me absolutely floored. I can't wait to see this again. Like Thursday can't come soon enough because I like, yeah, this interesting and crazy choices. That being said, I really also was kind of shocked by how much I enjoyed. Well, what's her name? Chavez,
America.
America. Yeah, there you go. I thought for sure I wasn't gonna like her, and I think they did a good job building in like a very short amount of time a character that was likable and relatable is not the right word, but like we cared about her and her circumstances. I I was really blown away and like kind of stoked to like where the MCU's at and what can happen going forward.
Matt.
I I'm torn on this because I really liked it. I will say that. But I did not love it. What I do love about it though is the MCU at its best, I think, is when it finds really kind of unique and interesting directors and kind of lets them put a stamp on the movie. We've seen it with, James Gunn and Taika Waititi, and even going back, love it or hate it with Shane Black and Iron Man 3. And I think from phase 3 onward, we've had, Kevin Feige finding really interesting filmmakers and kind of letting them do their thing. Even Chloe Zhao in Eternals. I mean, I didn't love that movie, but they kind of let her do her thing in that. And I think in this, they're very much letting Sam Raimi do his thing. And that's what I was kind of most surprised at. And I think, like Joey said, for better or for worse, it's like all the best and worst of Sam Raimi from those Spider-Man movies and from the Evil Dead movies and everything. And you know what? I ended up really liking it. I think it just kind of takes a long time to get rolling. And then by the second and third act, when shit starts to hit the fan, I'm like, okay, this is where this movie's going. And Sam Raimi's kind of let loose even more and kind of have those horror elements and all those kind of zany kind of things you see in all of his movies with the camera movements and the weird edits and the music cues and different things like that. I was surprised at how violent it was and how kind of horror adjacent it really was. It's not necessarily kind of scary, but for kids, I think it will be. And I think it's a good introduction to that. And yeah, so I'm a little mixed on it overall, and I can't wait to talk to you guys. But I think like I am eager to see it again because I feel like with any MCU movie, like when I get out of it, it's just like a whirlwind of feelings, and I don't know exactly how I feel. But I think ultimately, that first act, I was like, I don't know if I like this. And then kind of when it starts picking up and I'm like, I think this was really entertaining. So it's a bit messy, which is, a Sam Raimi movie, but I think overall kind of enjoyable.
Yeah, before I give my thoughts, I forgot to ask Joey, then Kev, then Matt. What would you give it on the Kind of Funny review scale, which is 1 to 5, terrible, bad, okay, great, or amazing? Joey.
I'm torn between a 3 and a 4. I would probably decide on a 4 as of right now upon rewatch and like thinking about it more than like the last 12 hours. That might change a little bit, but that would be mine.
Kev.
I think one thing I want to reiterate, or not reiterate, but like state that Matt said. Like I don't know that I loved it. I enjoyed it a lot, but I'm not sure that I loved it. And I think it's a solid 4 for me. Great.
Matt.
I'm right where Joey is, where I'm kind of in between a 3 and a 4. I think I would lean towards 4 on your guys' rating scale, just because I think overall I still love the MCU. I love kind of something I just didn't mention, but like this is very much a sequel to WandaVision as much as it is a Doctor Strange movie. And I think that stuff, like the Disney Plus and leaning into those shows being very, very important for the movies, I think is really cool. So I think while it's messy, I'd still kind of lean towards that 4 rather than a 3, but I'm somewhere in between those two ratings.
I'm
So
I'm
4 for me.
right there with you, Matt. Where I would give it a 4. I would say that it's great, and I think that that is almost working against itself in my mind of what this movie is. I am not a Sam Raimi fan. I think that this movie just makes that a fact for sure for me. Never been the
Sure.
biggest fan
Interesting.
of the Spider-Man movies. Everybody knows that, and where I love those movies, but like I do not like them from a quality perspective. And the Evil Dead stuff, never fully seen one of the movies, but what I have seen, not really for me. And seeing this, it is full on Sam Raimi. And because of that, I think it's a hard thing for me to latch onto. But despite that, they knocked it out of the park being just full on in on the creative vision. And I'm all about that. I think,
Mhm.
especially with where we're at with phase 4, the MCU is so vast and varied at this point with so many different characters that as long as the characters and locations and the kind of science behind the entire MCU is being respected, I would much rather see directors go wild within those rules with their vision and their voice than just kind of seeing things that we've seen over and over again. So, despite me not being a fan, I'm happy that he tackled this movie, and I'm
Mhm.
happy that he did the way that he did, because it gave us stuff that we're not going to see in other Marvel movies or other superhero movies. And I think that there was zero restraint shown when it comes to that kind of campy horror vibe that this has. Like you're saying, Matt, it's
Yeah.
not really scary, but this movie's fucked up in a way that I
Mhm.
get the vibes of like 80s kids movies, where this pushes the PG-13 rating
Oh,
as far as
totally.
it could possibly go. And I think that in a lot of ways, there are moments, there are many, many, many moments, whether it's camera motions and tricks and editing, or events that actually happen in the movie, that they do such a good job of playing with your expectations and just again, not trying to spoil anything, like they push the line of like what's acceptable to show and what you can't show, and sometimes the things they don't
Mhm.
show but you know
Yep.
happened, make it even
Yeah.
scarier and make it more brutal. And I think that that is where Sam Raimi really shines in this movie,
Mhm.
of going all out and allowing moments to happen that are backed up with the cinematography and editing. And that's kind of the magic, where it's like, okay, cool, it might not be for me, but I get it, and they're really nailing it with this.
I
Taking it, go for it, Kev.
I was just gonna say, like, I that's so true, and I feel like this does such a good job making the villain of this movie really intimidating. You
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
Yeah, the villain in this movie is a monster, unlike anything we've seen in the MCU, and I think that that is a cool energy where we've heard for a while there's horror vibes, and just rewatching Doctor Strange 1 last week in review, I was reminded that like Scott Derrickson directing that, there are horror elements kind of in the background of that movie. This movie just totally takes it to the forefront and pushes hard with that camp factor as well, and it kind of just creates something that is like weirdly unique, because it is so
Mhm.
Sam Raimi, but it also is so different than the Spider-Man movies. Like you'd think, oh, Sam Raimi, he's done superheroes before. It's like, no, not like this. Like this, especially being such a focused story on Strange and Wanda. I'm surprised at the simplicity of the plot of Multiverse of Badness. And I actually think that at the end of the day, it was a good call to keep it this simple, because it allowed them to focus a bit more on character moments. And in classic MCU fashion, I can't wait to watch this again, because some of the things that they say or they do, or background on
Mhm.
stories or events that we've known before, but now we get a different perspective on. I
Yeah.
love where this movie lets off, where it very much feels like um, the end of an arc of storytelling that we've gotten for Strange and Wanda over the last couple projects, but
Yeah.
also very clearly is moving us towards a future that I'm really excited for these characters, and seeing where they're gonna take it all, and not just the characters but the world that they built out with this. And Danny Elfman, I've been saying it a lot. I'm a little hit or miss with him. I love his older work, but whenever it's him kind of adapting other people's themes, I'm not traditionally the biggest fan. With Age of Ultron or with Batman v Superman, I didn't really love those scores. I love the score of this movie, that he used the themes so well. And to Joey's point, like they're in your face, they are appropriate, they're at the right times. But I don't think this movie would be as good as it is without Danny Elfman working with Sam Raimi, because it has this kind of kinetic energy where there is always 10 out of 10 Danny Elfman score progressing the like locomotion and momentum of the scenes. Like all the action scenes feel almost like Looney Tunes-esque in terms of the way the music and the action is working back and forth. And I was very, very impressed with that.
Yeah, the music in this is
go ahead,
insane.
Joe.
Oh, yeah, it's just I feel like I haven't, and maybe it's just a lot of me not paying attention, but, like, I feel like it's been a while since, like, I felt a Danny Elfman project has been so intertwined with the film itself, where it's like, I don't really feel like you can separate the 2, and especially someone who doesn't normally pick up on that, I was, like, really, really happy with that.
Matt, I want to get to you in just 1 second, but before we
Yeah.
do that, let me tell you about our sponsors. Shout out to Babbel for sponsoring this episode. For most of us, learning a second language in high school or college wasn't exactly a high point in our academic careers. Definitely not me. I took Spanish, didn't do well in it the first time, did okay the second time. You know what? We'll move on. Now, thanks to Babbel, the language learning app that's sold more than 10 million subscriptions, there's an addictively fun and easy way to learn a new language. Whether you'll be traveling abroad, connecting in a deeper way with family, or you just have some free time, Babbel teaches bite-sized language lessons that you'll actually use in the real world. Greg Miller has been learning French little by little, and now when he goes back home to Canada to see Jen's family, he'll be able to communicate better. Isn't that a lovely situation? Babbel's 15-minute lessons make it the perfect way to learn a new language on the go. Plus, Babbel's speech recognition technology helps you to improve your pronunciation and accent. Right now, you can save up to 60% off your subscription when you go to babbel.com/kindafunny. That's BABBEL.com/kindafunny for up to 60% off your subscription. Babbel, language for life. One more time, babbel.com/kindafunny. Shout out to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this episode. Using the internet without ExpressVPN is like walking your dog in public without securing them on a leash. Most of the time, you'll probably be fine, but what if one day your dog runs away or gets dog-napped? It's better to be careful, especially when it's as simple as using ExpressVPN. We've been using ExpressVPN here at Kinda Funny for years now. Me personally, I've been using it, and I know that my internet browsing is secure. It just gives me that peace of mind that I need. Every time you connect to an unencrypted network in cafes, hotels, airports, your online data is not secure, but ExpressVPN creates a secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so they can't, and it's great. I use it on my desktop, I use it on my phone, I use it everywhere that I use the internet. It would take a hacker with a supercomputer over 1 billion years to get past ExpressVPN's encryption. You can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN at expressvpn.com/kindafunny. That's expressvpn.com/kindafunny, expressvpn.com/kindafunny. Shout out to Chime for sponsoring this episode. No one likes waiting on a paycheck, especially when you've got bills due. Good thing there's Chime. Now you can get your paycheck up to 2 days early with direct deposit. That's up to 2 more days to save, pay bills, and generally just feel good about your money situation. But Chime is more than just about getting paid early. It's also an award-winning mobile app, checking account, debit card, and optional savings account. So what are you waiting for? Hopefully not your paycheck. You can get started with Chime today. Applying for a free account takes less than 2 minutes. You can get started at chime.com/kfgames. That's chime.com/kfgames, chime.com/kfgames. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank or Stride Bank NA, members FDIC. Early access to direct deposit funds depends on payer. Go for it, Matt.
I was just going to completely agree. Like, this is the first time in a long time. Like, Danny Elfman, I felt like has been, Coachella aside, been kind of watered down the last decade or so. Like, I love his early stuff with Tim Burton and even Raimi with the Spider-Man trilogy and stuff like that. But I feel like he started doing weirder and weirder projects, but not weird in the good way like he was doing with Burton, where he would do like 50 Shades of Grey and different things like that, where his scores just felt like, normal scores. Where I felt like this, it's integral to the movie, like to what Joe and Tim was saying. Like, it is very much I hate saying this, but a character in the movie, but it kind of is, and
Mhm.
very much so. And I feel like seeing him kind of let loose, just like Raimi was able to, was such a blast because, it's something that, good music, I feel like a lot of the times is you don't want to notice it. It just wants to be part of the movie. But then there are times like with Elfman and other people where you're like, no, there's a couple moments where you'll literally pop for or a song or like things that are integral to the plot of the movie, and you're like, oh, Danny Elfman's also going off, and that's fantastic because I haven't seen this guy do this in a very, very long time.
Yeah, just sticking with the music for a sec. Like there's one music cue in particular,
Yeah.
one of many, but there's one that I lost my shit. I
Yeah,
didn't
so did
expect
I.
it, and the way that it happened was just like it was overwhelmingly exciting to me. And I think that that is kind of like peak MCU, right? Is like these moments that like you're like, that's too good to be true. I can't imagine they would do it. And then they do it, and you're like, holy crap, like, thank you. Like, it's rewarding us for the investment that we've given superhero movies, right? And like the MCU in
Mhm.
particular for so many years. And speaking of that, we rewatched Doctor Strange 1. I highly recommend everybody rewatch 1. This movie does such a good job being a sequel to that one and referencing things. And I think that that's something that we don't talk about a lot in the MCU, is how ridiculous it is that these movies function standalone as part of their own franchise and then part of the MCU as a whole. And I was really impressed with the kind of love and care that this one gave the first movie, with almost like in a lot of ways payoffs to setups from the first one that I would have never expected to see. So I definitely recommend rewatching it before you go in.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, for the most part. I think, like, we are getting to a point, like, just to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, and I used it as a positive, but, like, needing to see the first Doctor Strange, needing to see all the Avengers movies, and then needing to see, WandaVision, I feel like WandaVision is very integral to this movie, and I think that's really interesting because I feel like there are a lot of, more casual, kind of moviegoers that probably maybe don't watch the Disney Plus show or felt like they didn't need to. And I think this movie is proof that, those all of those shows are going to be very, 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 very important. And I feel like you're losing a ton of context if you don't watch them. I think it can work without it. It's still like an entertaining movie. You just might be lost at certain points of character motivations and different things like that, but I do worry a little bit about that, and I think they do a good enough job, but we are getting to a point where I guess they just trust that everyone is as invested as we are, or at least somewhat invested as much as we are, for them to kind of. I'm just surprised at how hard, like Kevin said, they go with a lot of these things where they just trust their audience to kind of either get it, or if you didn't see that, the storytelling will make sense. But it's impressive.
Yeah, totally. Kev, you have any other thoughts on it?
No, that is an interesting place because I feel like WandaVision is a show you like that help would have helped to watch, and like I don't think the movie falls apart without watching that. But like I was a little shocked that other shows in the MCU, like it didn't feel like it was mandatory,
Mhm.
and I'm happy about that. Um, but also I don't know. It's so hard to talk about this stuff without like getting into spoilers. But it's I don't know. Like I feel like you could have gone in there without, and they do such a good job of like sprinkling things in that like help you get to where you need to go. You know what
Totally.
I mean?
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to kind of say as well was, oh my God, I lost my train of thought. But with the Raimi stuff, like I loved all the Evil Deadness of it, and like the thing that you guys brought up on your Spider-Man and reviews constantly, like that montage. I can't believe you went back to it where he would did the pop art kind of like montage and the weird edits and things like that. And then that's the stuff that I really kind of love throughout the whole movie, is just like how much they just. Shocked that they're just like, yeah, go off and do your thing, man. Because and then, oh, the other thing was with spoilers, like if you're watching this, you probably don't care that much, but like I was surprised. Like I got a lot of this movie spoiled beforehand, and I was still surprised throughout it. That was the point that I was trying to make. Like I had probably the biggest stuff spoiled for me accidentally on Twitter, and just to kind of, for people who are watching, being like, you're probably still don't know everything that's in this movie, to kind of assure people, because there were genuinely moments where I'm like, holy shit, like I was not expecting that, or the places that they go.
Well, that's I think an important thing to bring up is the value of the MCU at this point is if the most exciting and the best thing about the movie is something that can be spoiled, it's not a good movie. And I feel
Yes, I
like
agree.
that's MCU has proven to us at this point that it's like, cool, you Toby and Andrew are in No Way Home. If that if watching the movie knowing that makes it a bad experience for you, then they didn't do a
Agreed.
good
Yeah.
job handling it, making it a
Mm.
movie, or making that moment actually matter. I think that they have been killing it so far, and I think that this movie is another perfect example where there is extreme fan service in this movie, but it doesn't play
Hmm.
as fan service. It plays as contextually a perfect conduit for the storytelling of Wanda and Strange's journey through this multiverse of madness and all that. It doesn't feel like things are just here just to make the audience cheer or like emote in any way. It feels like it's part of it, and the audience is going to cheer and emote. So it's like it's kind of this like perfect concoction of the levels of investment that people are in, because they know that people are going to go into this movie not knowing anything, so it has to be entertaining for them, so they have to in the movie give context for what's going on. But the reality is that majority of people are the people that they're targeting are the ones that are at least invested enough to have seen a certain amount of these things, so at least you understand the
Yeah.
language of it. And I just
Mm.
appreciate what a point that they know that, and they're like, we're not going to dumb this down. People get it. We're not dealing with idiots. We're dealing with mainstream populace, that this is part of pop culture at this point. So it's not so much like you got to do all your homework. It's more like the more homework you do, the more you're going to get out of it. And
Yeah.
that's something I found doing our rewatches and in review as a whole and all that. I love going back and watching some of the older movies with the context of
Same,
where we're
dude.
at now, because it just strengthens our understanding of all of it, and it really just allows movies like this to be as off the rails as it is. But it's funny because like I feel like this movie is almost like a contradiction, where it's like it is so off the rails, but it only works because of how on rails it is. It's so
Mm.
focused in what it's trying to accomplish, and it does simply that.
I yeah, I think the way that this movie handles the multiverse is how I wanted the multiverse to be handled, and other shows I haven't enjoyed. You know what they've done with the multiverse, like specifically What If. It just doesn't seem like there's much weight and value to the stories that were being told. Where this is, I think, the opposite. There's so much weight, and like things happen. It's I'm very excited to see how the MCU is dealing with the multiverse at large with the decisions they've made in this movie.
Yeah,
I
I think
can't wait
it
to see.
doesn't let itself get lost in like the minutia and the detail that would kind of get it off rails. It's like, no, we're sticking to these facts, and that's what we're focusing on, and that's what lets the like creative off the rails stuff really flourish. Um, so that you're not getting caught up in like the little intricacies of how everything works.
Yeah,
I
they've
feel
done such
like
a good job with time travel and multiverse stuff, right? Of like
yeah.
not, over complicating it and making it so we can pick it apart, or they have to go back and retcon things. Cause I think to Tim's point, like, I love going back and rewatching these. And even if they pick up plot points and further things or change things from the past, like it never feels like, crummy retconning, which some movies can do, being like, oh, we need to fix this mistake. So let's just in the next movie kind of do something different that kind of fixes that. Like it never feels like that. It feels like it's always adding on to it. And then when you do those rewatches, you get more. Like I rewatching Age of Ultron, I like that movie way more now than I did before because of the context in WandaVision and other things like that. That I go back and I go, you kind of reevaluate the movies kind of each time you do a rewatch when you have more of the story, which I think is what makes the MCU so special and entertaining. And sorry, Joe, I cut you off though. Keep going.
Oh, no, it's totally fine. No, I totally agree. Like, I historically have not been a huge Doctor Strange fan. Like,
Yeah.
this is probably Doctor Strange 1 is the movie I've probably seen the least in all of the MCU. But upon like rewatching it after we've gotten Spider-Man and like all of these other movies, and especially now after we've gotten Multiverse of Madness, I feel like I have a bigger appreciation for Doctor Strange as he is and his storylines and stuff like that, and I would probably rank it higher now if I did my re-ranked my personal list.
Yeah, I mean, I think a thing I definitely want to say here is I am with Kev where I cannot wait for Thursday. Like, I want to watch this movie again so bad, and it's funny because I don't think it's as good as some of the other movies that I've wanted to see again, but it's just like there's just a lot in this one, and it's like I really kind of want to sit and see how I feel after a second viewing to like really lock it all in. But again, I'm happy the direction they went, and like looking, I'm the type of guy that when I look at the MCU movies, everyone knows how invested I am in this shit. Like I live and breathe it. I freaking love Marvel Studios. But I really have noticed that I've kind of fallen into a thing of like, do I want to watch this movie 3 times in theaters? And those are the ones that are my top tier, right? And there's a lot of those that end up being the case. Then there's the ones that I'm like, I'm watching these 2 times in theaters, which I think is my kind of baseline for MCU movies, where I like watching movies. I like Marvel movies. I watch it once and I'm immediately like, I want to watch it again. And like Shang-Chi is a perfect example of that, right? And Spider-Man is an example of 3 times in theaters. In the recent in phase 4, Black Widow and Eternals are 2 that I only saw in theaters once, and I'm like, I don't need to see these again. You know what I mean? Like I'm good. I enjoyed them for what they are, but I don't need to watch it again. This one, I'm like, I want to watch it a second time for sure. Will I want to watch it a third after that? I think that's a little bit more doubtful, but hey, we'll have to wait and see. But I think that it's good company to be in at that point. Like, are all of you excited to see it again?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I'm in the exact same boat as you, where I feel like I love seeing these a second time just because, like I said earlier, like I feel like my initial reaction is almost like overwhelmed, and I just like taking it in the second time, knowing exactly what happens in the movie and kind of being able to kind of look around the scene and pick out different things or kind of just sit with characters and focus on a different thing. And I feel like I always get more out of them a second time, so I almost don't even trust my initial reactions sometimes until I see it again. But it's always, yeah, I agree with you that I feel like I'm mixed on it, but I do really, really, really want to see it again. So that's a good sign.
Yeah. Joe?
One more thing. How did you guys feel about some of the special effects in this movie?
Oh,
Because I did I think a lot of them towards the beginning were pretty rough and not super great. And that was surprising to me. As I watched the movie and I saw kind of how things evolved, it to me was very clear that they pushed some of their resources to finishing those instead of some stuff at the beginning. But I just wanted to see what you guys thought.
Kev?
Oh, I was just say, yeah, it was kind of shocking at the start. There were some like effects that looked really, really bad. There was specifically one gets like picked up and thrown around, and it was like, oof, that looks like that that should be on like the Disney Plus shows.
Disney Plus.
Yeah, and it's kind of a bummer, and it's like I hope that like I understand time restraints and stuff like that, but I want them to tighten those kind of things up so that everything looks as cool as possible, you know?
Yeah, I unfortunately think this is just the future. It's just where we're at. Like, we're either going to get these movies at this quality, or we're not going to get them, or it's going to go back to how it was in like phase 1, where it's like we get one MCU movie every couple years, which I would much prefer this, where it's like the intent's there. I get it, but yeah, it is unfortunate to see some of the effects kind of not hold up, and you kind of need to just use your imagination a bit to allow. And that's where I'm like, is the choreography there? And I think in this movie it definitely was. So it didn't distract me too much, but it is unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you guys where like that's what I meant by that first act being rough. Like I think a mix of like how the movie opens, some of the exposition dumps, kind of the clunky dialogue and like storytelling. Like I think it eventually finds its footing, like I said. But like I remember it starting in that opening scene. I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I like this or how it looks or where it's going or any of that. And then as it kind of went, I'm like, I don't know. And then it kind of finds its footing. I do like the creature design in it, and I think like the creatures themselves all look good. It's just when they go to those different worlds and it's all CG backgrounds, and whether it was green screen or the kind of Lucasfilm, I forget what it's called, the thing that they use. But yeah, volume. Yeah, thank you, Tim. I don't know. Yeah, it did look rough around the edges, but like some of that is the Raimi-ness of it too. I think in that last act, like there was some of the practical effects. I'm like, will be off-putting to some people, but like some people will really vibe with that too, where it is that kind of campy horror kind of vibe that he's good at. He'll make you kind of do a jump scare and then make you laugh at the jump scare. And I feel like some of the effects that he uses and the camera movements all add into that and bring kind of this weird vibe to the whole thing. And then, yeah, I agree that maybe they're spread too thin with all the different special effects studios that they use and things like that. But I don't know. I'm kind of with Tim where it's like it is, but it is what it is. You just kind of deal with it. I do think it looks more expensive than the Disney Plus shows for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting with that. Like, I feel like with Raimi, there is so much style. I do think there's a lot of substance to back up this movie. And I feel like most of the style, the majority of the style is kind of in service of something that's more substantial, like plot wise or character wise. But there's a couple examples that I'll definitely talk about in our interview later that, like, while cool, I feel like they were not backed up by actual great motivations or stuff. And it's kind of like, this is a cool thing that's happening. That's really cool. And I should be really into, but I am not, because it kind of just seems like out of this world, like not correct. But having said that, I think that one of my favorite things about Doctor Strange 1 was the ridiculous levels of creativity when it came to magic and thinking about what are the different talents that the Strange universe has that we haven't seen in MCU. So the idea of the portals, the idea of being able to make the little platforms to jump on, using the time stone to rewind time and face Dormammu and all that stuff. Every single use of magic is so creative. This movie takes that to like 22. Like, it is so ridiculous how cool different types of magic are used and how varied all of that stuff is. Again, not always to the best effect, but I think that the theme of my review for this movie is I'm happy they went as hard as they did. It didn't always work, but I appreciate it because it is a very, very fun experience. Although I will say we watched it in simultaneously the best and worst environment of all time. We got to watch it in IMAX, which I highly recommend if you guys have access to IMAX. The entire thing was in large format and it was beautiful. So well utilized. But we watched it at the Metreon IMAX, which is a 400-person auditorium, and there were less than 20 people in it. So while that's cool that we got our own kind of experience, this is a crowd movie. Like, this is a movie there's going to be cheers, there's going to be wails, there's going to be like, oh my God, it's like it is. I can't wait for Thursday to get that real energy going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a huge part of my interest in going on Thursday. Of like, I'm excited to watch other people watch this movie. Yeah. And I think it's going to be. I feel like how your tagline is. I feel. What is it again? Say it again. Sorry, I can't remember. Tim. You're happy they went
as hard as they went.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like mine is for better or for worse in terms of there's a lot that happens, and some of it you're gonna love, and some of it you're not gonna love, but they all happen.
Yeah. People are going to have some thoughts about this movie.
I'm genuinely curious to see how people feel, because I was the same. We saw it at a press screening, and there was a good amount of people, but a press audience for Marvel movies is always interesting because you have like a handful of us that are like really into it and will pop for a music cue, and then the rest are just kind of jaded old critics that are just there to review the movie for a newspaper. So I think it elevates the material when you see it with an audience, and I think that is part of the experience. So that's another reason why after all of these press screenings, I'm like, I need to see it opening night with an audience, because that is part of it, right? So I'm excited for that.
It was us. So it was me, Joey, Kevin, Paula, and like, I swear to God, like all the other people were like 60-plus-year-old women.
Absolutely.
And I was like, okay. And so here we are, me, Joey, and Kevin fucking losing our shit. Whoa.
And it doesn't help that the theater's so big that if other people are popping, you can't even hear it. So it did just feel like it was only
I feel like they heard us pop, or more specifically me pop. Me pop at many moments where it was like, I wonder.
They made notes. They made notes in their notebook.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Those screenings are always so interesting because it's like behind us there was someone like actually taking notes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was like, oh, all right, I'm so happy that's not what we're
I
doing.
love that for you guys.
Yeah.
Inside baseball, baby.
Yeah.
You'll love to see it. Well, anyways, that has been our spoiler-free review of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Please go watch this movie and then return to check us out on In Review this Friday. Can't wait to get into all the spoilers. A lot of stuff to spoil, so that's going to be a lot of fun to get into. But Matt, where can people find you?
You guys can follow the Untitled Movie Podcast and Untitled Movie Reviews on YouTube and podcast services. If you want a one-stop shop for everything we do, if you're on Letterboxd, just search Untitled_movies, and you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rorabeck.
Hell yes. And then also, if you're an MCU fan, tomorrow, Moon Knight, the finale is happening. We're going to be doing a screencast ASAP. It should be going out sometime in the afternoon. And if you're a patreon.com/KindaFunny supporter, you'll be able to see it live as we record it. But until then, I love you all. Goodbye.